Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Broderick Sawyer, and welcome to Black and Mental Health Week. Today, we're going to be talking about a behemoth of a topic, a very big topic, challenging anti-Blackness, embodying self-compassion and confidence. And what does this really look like for Black people? As we can see, anti-Blackness is rampant, throughout society. So we're going to talk about how we can maintain a positive self-image despite those messages. Okay. That's a lot. That's a big topic, but it is possible. This is about hope and inspiration. So hopefully this presentation will inspire you and give you practical tools to embody a sense of self-compassion as it applies to the experience of being a Black person, which is anti-Blackness. It's a big part of our experience. A little bit about me. I'm going to encourage you to go to my website for just more information. And also you can look in the description of the video. But in essence, I'm a psychologist, consultant, speaker, activist, meditation teacher, and the director of the Racial Trauma Center at Genesee Valley Psychology and a Black and Mental Health co-founder. So just a little bit more introduction to myself and just some disclaimers about style in this presentation in particular. You'll see in the presentation, I'm more of a narrative, philosophical kind of presenter. Okay, so really I'm moving you from one place of awareness into another, and it's sort of a persuasive kind of style. Okay, so the other thing to understand is it's not a literal analysis, it's more functional. So you don't want to get too caught up on nitty-gritty details and different things like that. All the words and concepts used are just so I can lead you through the analysis. Some things you might find similar to what you know. Some things you might find that might be different. But the key thing is, how do we pull everything together to make sense out of how to be more loving to ourselves in this society? This society. Here in this presentation, we're centering how to counteract internalization of racist philosophies with self-compassion. That is our focus. So a lot of the other manifestations of racism we won't be talking about, but it doesn't mean that those things aren't important. Okay, so this is our scope. And then also references upon request. Okay, and this is another piece of philosophy and being able to work through a framework and propose new things. It's important to use the literature, but at the same time, when you're creating new things, there is no literature to stand on. But if you would like what I am using, you can request that through my contact information, which is on the below of each slide. And now when we're thinking more about the content today, any concept I'm talking about, it's on a spectrum. Okay, so let me just say that blanket, all right? And we're also discussing in context of the privilege that you have, not the privilege that you don't have. So we want to become mindful of our context and our situation and develop mindfulness around what tools that we have. So we're not thinking or speaking from a place of victimhood and what we don't have. We're speaking from a place of what we do have, okay? So I want you to notice how you're thinking even throughout this presentation. I want you to focus on what you can do, not what you can't, okay? Again, sort of broad strokes. I'm not catch-all, matter-of-fact kind of style, especially as I catch a rhythm. And I draw this information from philosophy, life experiences, spirituality, my education, observations in society, clinical work, etc. And thus far, this is the best I got in terms of how we protect our self-esteem and our self-love as Black people. Okay. So today's lecture, what we're going to cover is self-compassion and real confidence. And we're going to talk, and real confidence are the same. Okay, so that's one point we're going to really hammer home to begin with. Then we're going to talk about how practicing self-compassion is different for Black people because of anti-Blackness, okay? So the originator of the conceptual model that we'll be using, the framework of self-compassion, is Dr. Neff, Neff. I believe she's at the University of Austin. She is, for all intents and purposes, she is a white lady. So we are going to add the concept of anti-Blackness to her particular framework, but really the framework is just to make things practical so we can practice them, okay? So then we're going to talk about how practicing self-compassion can help you feel confident even when anti-Blackness is present, okay? This is a very key feature of this. A lot of times we think that racism has to stop before we can feel good about ourselves, but this particular framework and what I'm proposing radically challenges that basic assumption, okay? And I'll show you the practices that can help us do that as we wrap up the presentation. So, got a lot to get through. So what the hell do we mean by confidence? What is confidence? So we have two types of confidence here, and I'm sure you can identify them in yourselves as well as in other people. First, we have, I don't call it fake confidence, I call it forced confidence. This kind of confidence is compensating, okay, for insecurity. It can be conscious or it can be subconscious. In the literature, actually, for Black men, there is something called the cool pose, sort of the propping up of oneself and seemingly narcissistic, when really for Black men, it's a tool to combat the negative anti-Black shaming messages of society. So it's compensatory. So this forged confidence is to combat anti-Blackness. Okay, so that's one example of it. But then again, then it's just this self-soothing insecurity sort of confidence, putting up a front of confidence when we are really terrified. Okay, if we're ignoring that part of our fear and we're not soothing that fear, and rather we're pumping ourselves up to appear confident, that's not real confidence. Okay. And it can be protective in context. So I'm not saying that forged confidence is bad or not helpful. It's just not a state of true confidence, okay? And for Black folks, you can think about how and why forged confidence can be really protective and really, really helpful. And sometimes we might need to do that and need to be that way in certain situations that might require it, especially when we're combating racism. Okay, so this forged confidence, in essence, we want to see it as this unconscious shame avoidance. I don't want to feel bad, so I'm going to act as if I'm not bad, okay, and ignore that bad reality. Real confidence is embodied, unquestioning, and emotionally affectionate. Unquestioning meaning that you don't question your abilities. You don't question them. You don't question your good enoughness, right? You don't question your ability to handle tough situations and be resilient and achieve through those things. Even when you are in a dark room, you trust that, oh, it's just because the light's not on. It's not like, oh my goodness, there's darkness, what do I do? It's, oh, I'm just gonna pop on this light, or this light's gonna come on eventually. You're trusting in that. That's true. You're buff without needing to flex. Kind of like a tiger. Like a tiger is walking around in the jungle real slow, like laying around, taking naps, all these different things. It's not like walking around, like looking over his shoulder, because it knows it's a tiger. It knows it. It's not, it's not questioning it, right? It looks at itself, sees the claws, sees the power, sees how others react to it when it's really embodied, and just, oh, wait, no, I am powerful. The tiger doesn't need to go around scratching everybody up when it's not hungry, in order to show its power. It's embodied, understood. The only reason people forge confidence is because they're not confident, they're not truly confident. They're trying to convince themselves by convincing everybody else, really. But really, true confidence, that comes from within. It's this trust, affection, appreciation for oneself and abilities, but also unconditional love and support. One of my favorite just notions is how our mamas love us Just generally speaking, no matter what. You need to have that that kind of conceptual understanding of true confidence. You need to love yourself like nobody else can. Nobody else. Okay, that's what you're looking for. It's this blinding belief and confidence in oneself. And when bad things happen, you don't think, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. You just think, okay, I just have to hit the mark next time. You know, it's unquestioning, not fake. Okay, so that's what we need. So now let's talk about the Black reality. Okay. And this, in essence, I want you to understand this to combat racism. Okay. This is a part of maintaining your self-compassion and your confidence. And we'll get into more so how that all relates by first understanding this piece. So color blindness, this global I don't see color mantra, it's what keeps racist abuse going. Okay. It keeps it going. So the philosophy of all systems is rooted in color blindness. Okay. So we're talking about education, law, government, psychology, everything it touches. This is our most popular philosophy and cultural appraisal, right? Cultural summary of what race is. Oh, I don't see color. I don't notice it. Ha ha ha. Look at me. I'm not racist, right? This is why critical race theory is also like the plague to white supremacy. Okay. And see, critical race theory is the opposite of color blindness. Opposite of being blind to something is having sight. And that's what critical race theory does and shines a light systemically on things, right? But really, we want to honor our own truth and learn how to validate ourselves, okay? If racism doesn't exist, right, it's cultural, tells you that racism isn't really existing, then it's not really happening, okay? Color blindness causes stress if you believe the white perspective of your Black experience, okay? Color blindness is only harmful if you believe the white perspective of your Black experience. Pretending we don't see race is to ignore the pain and shame of racism, right? And that is being perpetuated by white society and white stakeholders, okay? You need to understand the difference between your realities in that way, okay? Past denial of racism, okay, that racism is wrong, is what allowed it when we got put onto the boats all those years ago. Denial that it's wrong, denial of shame, you know, denial that I hate people who don't look like me or view them as less than. We just denied and rationalized it and it was okay. It's the same dynamic today, but now it's even more subconscious, okay? It's harder to see, okay, but easier to deny. Because if I don't have conscious awareness that I'm pretending race doesn't exist, because it makes me more comfortable to pretend that, right? If I can deny that reality, then it can keep racism keeps going and keeps perpetuating itself. But if it's subconscious, now I don't even know that I am denying it. Okay. So there are many white people out there who are denying it and do not have consciousness of what they're denying. So I say all this to say, don't try to convince other people of your experience when you're trying to find emotional peace. Okay. And when we're trying to internalize a positive self-image. Okay. We can't convince the outside world to not use this color blindness crap. We can't convince them always. We need to be convinced of our truth first, right? Remember our scope here. We're only talking about internalization, right? Doesn't mean that education and stuff that isn't good, isn't helpful. We're focusing on self today, okay? So structures, systemic structures reinforce and add fuel to this gaslighting, okay? So structural reflections of projected truth of our criminality or laziness, right? It maintains this racist abuse cycle. So the structures cause the situations and then blame us for how we respond to those situations. That's abusive. That's emotional abuse. Okay. We're not going to talk about the physical abuse today, but it's essentially the same. So if racism doesn't exist, right, color blindness, then mistreatment of Black people is warranted because they're somehow bad or wrong, right? And this is what it is. Like I said, this is the best I got in terms of what I know and my observations. This is what it seems like. And what we're going to unpack here, the cycle of racist abuse in therapy terms, this is what we call projective identification. There's projection, and then there's projective identification, which is even more severe to the consciousness of someone who is being abused. Okay, projective identification, or the cycle of racist abuse here. So let's lay this out, and then we will get into self-compassion, how this understanding is intertwined in the case of Black and brown people. So how it works. Black person experiences racism, politely expresses to the white person who is racist, please stop, or ouch, or some variation. This emotionally floods this white person, and they become overly emotional for the situation, starts crying, getting angry, blaming the Black person for making them feel how they are feeling, so throwing a tantrum with no consequences. Then the Black person begins to feel badly for the harm that they have caused the white person, right? And internalizing it, thinking, wow, they couldn't have had that much emotion about this if I didn't really cause them harm. Generationally, we have been framed as the ones who are wrong or inferior or not intelligent or not people who can trust our reality. So this is very easy for us generationally to believe. We're thinking, oh, it must be me. Like, oh crap, okay. So the Black person might apologize, change the subject, not push, right? And if the Black person keeps pushing their reality and saying, no, that was racism, racism exists, and and the white person keeps avoiding and deflecting or retaliates or calls the cops and just keeps raising their resistance to what you're saying, your Black reality, aka I'm willing to harm you and ignore truth to uphold color blindness in order to avoid my shame and pain and responsibility for your continued oppression. Okay, this is the cycle. And now this is in an interpersonal cycle, in a, me and, Becca at my job, right? So let's think about this just very briefly on a social scale, okay? Because if this is truth, it'll also hold on if we blow it up. So many Black people in jail right now are thinking, I wouldn't be in jail if I wasn't a bad person. Okay, so we are quote unquote freed in 1865, right? Most properties and pieces of land are bought up, okay, already by the time we are freed. We don't have enough generational wealth to buy any land, anything like that. So now in the United States, the majority of land is controlled by white people, generationally speaking, okay? So now I end up not owning land, right? So now building wealth becomes quite difficult. So what do my communities look like? It's harder for them to make money. Gentrification and basically white colonizers coming into our communities and basically soaking money out of them. So then making financial situations for Black and brown people in those communities very difficult, meaning more stress, meaning more trauma, right? Meaning more desperation to make funds and resources naturally is going to push you into more criminal endeavors, right? So whose fault is that? If we're colorblind, it's the Black person's fault. If we understand and can validate the Black reality, we can see, no, white people they have created this system and they have created this situation that is causing me to do this, and then blaming me as if I caused the situation. This is emotional abuse, hardcore. And anytime color blindness is present, it's an attempt to emotionally abuse the Black collective psychology. You need to be able to see this and integrate it in a way that allows you to really see throughout all structures and all life situations. Okay. If you want your mind to be free. So this is where we start to move into self-compassion. Okay. Because these things are related. And first, in terms of defending against this colorblind gaslighting, we need to accept racism exists even if it's not validated. Okay, you need to accept that to the point where you know it on an embodied level. It's unquestioning. Okay, so we need to learn and embody essentially critical race theory, which is just an acknowledgement that racism exists and it's here, and there it is. And history can also inform the present moment in a very similar way. So we sort of embody the principles of critical race theory, critical consciousness, okay, understanding and seeing that, okay. Then we maximize personal comfort and we minimize intimate contact with folks who have a low racial literacy, okay. So what this means is if your Mary Sue is acting out color blindness and doesn't really understand the race of things, this means that if someone was racist to me, I'm not going to go complain to her. I'm not going to be vulnerable with her about my racialized identity, right? Similarly, if you know people of color and Black persons who embody color blindness, similarly, I cannot get validation of racism from folks who embody that kind of philosophy. It becomes, similarly, it's emotional abuse, okay? And when we understand this piece, we then need to become relatively uncompromising in our vision of things. We code switch without internalizing, okay? You can show up into a white space and, shuck and jive and all that, right? But you have to know that your reality of racism is real. You need to know I'm putting on this code switch mask for this outcome or for this desired purpose. Never get confused in the white reality and your reality, okay? So now this is where we move into self-compassion, okay? So self-compassion is where we get this firm trusting in our emotional, perceptual reality, okay? Counteracting emotional abuse with uncompromising self-validation of your emotions. Not intellectual. Self-compassion is not in your head. It is here. It's in your heart. It's in your soul, okay? So you want to, rather than become fearless towards supremacy, you want to love and trust yourself more than you fear white supremacy, okay? It needs to be that hierarchy shift. You need to be conscious of it, okay? We also, what self-compassion does is it allows us to feel kinship and family with the Black collective, and we'll get into how that works. And you want to think here about good examples of embodied self-compassion and embodied critical consciousness, okay? The two that I think that if we as all Black people embody that, liberation would happen a lot quicker, okay? When I think about Toni Morrison, go look her up. Her embodiment of consciousness is not shaken by any white person saying something to her, okay? Similarly to Malcolm X, right? His mind and heart became so unquestionable, so unshakable, that he was even willing to challenge other Black people for not embodying these principles of freedom, okay? So there's a way to get at this particular style and way of consciousness and feeling, okay? And through our ancestors and observing our ancestors, in particular, the most powerful ancestors in terms of mind, we can look at their qualities and then begin to practice to embody those qualities. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to talk about self-compassion and unpack it more. All right, y'all. So before we talk about self-compassion, I'm going to go back to another slide and speaking with our interpreter, we thought that it would be helpful to provide more language here for our deaf brothers and sisters so we can better understand projective identification. So let me put this in different language so we can better understand it. So essentially projective identification in rap and hip hop culture, what we hear is you the type to throw rocks and hide your hand, right? That's exactly what it is. So you cause the problem and then pretend that you didn't, okay? And that's what white people are doing in mass, right? In a very vast way throughout all systems, which then affect all individuals, okay? And this is global anti-Blackness, okay? So in essence, what white society is doing with colorblindness is throwing rocks and then hiding their hand, okay? So we don't acknowledge the racism, we pretend that it's not there. And then by doing that, we can continue to abuse you in ways that seem believable unless we have critical conversations like this, okay? So now that I feel like we have a little better language there, and even if you aren't deaf, hopefully that that description helped you even more, give you some added oomph to your understanding. So now let's go into self-compassion. Okay, so what do we mean? And back to our jumping off point here. First, we have our critical consciousness, accept racism exists, even if it's not validated. How do we hold on to that awareness and find happiness? That's when we move into self-compassion. Okay, so it moves beyond just an intellectual recognition of something, and it moves into how do I love and feel good with myself? Okay, just from you to you, your relationship with yourself. Okay. So this is one of my favorite quotes, is an African proverb: when there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. Okay. Here we're talking about emotional, psychological harm. Just because you love yourself, just because you have an embodied critical consciousness, doesn't mean that the cops won't pull you over. It doesn't mean that racism won't happen. It just means that you won't internalize it. Okay. So here this is practical, okay, not wishful thinking. Okay. Embodying compassion for yourself can't wait for anti-Blackness to stop. That in the beginning of the presentation, I talked about that. We are waiting for and trying to stop people from being racist, right? And stop people from embodying colorblindness before we sit in our truth and choose to love ourselves, right? That's a reflection of the abuser and abused dynamic. I only am good enough when the abuser says I am, right? We need to, these are mental chains. This is what we mean by mental chains right here, okay? So the world doesn't need to love you before you do, and they explicitly will not, okay? And then again, we're looping it right back around to Malcolm X, Toni Morrison. Listen to and watch them. There's a level of embodiment that highlights exactly what I'm talking about. The psychological makeup, of a woke Black person, okay? Our mistake is letting them make us think we just need to do one more thing to be good enough, okay? And Toni Morrison talks about that all the time, okay? And also how she woke up from that. So you want to define yourself, okay? This is about self-definition. And you want to define yourself as deserving of compassion, and then live that reality until you become it. This isn't philosophy in your mind. You want to choose this philosophy and then have your life reflect that, okay? And we'll talk about how mindfulness as a part of self-compassion does that. So now let's break apart the components of self-compassion. Um, so self-compassion, with all of its ingredients turned up all the way, it is enlightenment. Okay, it is self-actualization. All right. But this here, it's a spectrum. We have to keep this in mind. So it's a life practice. It isn't just something that you practice sometimes or whatever. This is a guiding principle. Self-compassion does not work unless you embody it. You can't do it sometimes. Okay. So we also need to keep in mind, as Black people, we need a lot of armor against this internalization and emotional racist abuse. We need more armor than, say, the white person who's practicing self-compassion. Okay. And our practice, whatever practice we're doing or philosophy we're trying to embody, we need to keep in mind the aggressiveness and intensity of its opposite, right? So if I want to love myself as a Black person in this world, I need to be as equally as aggressive with my personal practice of self-compassion. I need to match the aggressiveness of anti-Blackness out there. You see what I'm saying? A lot of practices and philosophies on whether it's self-liberation or liberation, you know, in an activist social sort of sense, it doesn't respect the gravity of the problem, the intensity of the problem. We want to pretend that problems aren't as severe as they are, but acknowledging that very severity now gives us realistic solutions because we're grounded in the aggressiveness of the problem. Okay. So now, 3 components of self-compassion. I'll pick them apart and then I'll talk about how to practice those particular things. Okay. So number 1 is mindfulness. Okay. Mindfulness is essentially it's energy work. You're paying attention to the energy of the present moment, and you are doing practices to enhance your capacity and ability to pay attention in the present moment. Okay, we'll unpack that. Don't worry. I'm going to keep explaining it. So paying attention is the glue to any new life practice, because if you've been living a certain way for a certain amount of time, your habits are automatic. So the only way to overturn those life habits is to pay attention as much as possible from moment to moment, to know that you're reflecting the principles that you choose. Okay, not just getting swept up in our cultural colorblindness, for example. Okay. In here, sorry, apologies for the slight typo here on number 2. That's just supposed to say kindness, not kindness, mindfulness, but you know, you need mindfulness too. So kindness, what do we mean by kindness? Positive, supportive self-talk, right? Or neutral self-talk, right? Sometimes not criticizing yourself, not talking down to yourself doesn't mean going the opposite direction and saying, I love myself and da-da-da, when you maybe don't believe it, you're not at that phase yet. Sometimes it's just saying nothing. Stop reinforcing a low self-esteem by not criticizing yourself. Sometimes just neutrality. Sometimes that's not kicking yourself while you're down is kindness. Or I think especially in the Black community, like getting ourselves hyped, you know what I mean, talking ourselves up, right? That is also a part of kindness and reflects kindness that is more Black specific, right? So we need to counteract the power of anti-Black messaging with equally as powerful self-talk. Okay, so we'll talk about kindness and self-talk. And then the last piece is common humanity. Okay, this is more important in the realm of self-compassion for Black people than white people. Why? Anti-Blackness is what's being validated in society. You need other Black validators to validate the Black experience. Non-Black people can't do that for you. They cannot. They can only really embody that color blindness. Okay. So we need to together stand in our humanity as people who experience anti-Blackness and racism. When we stand in that together, it removes the isolating experiences of racism, and it removes the gaslighting, the sort of isolation resulting from the gaslighting of colorblindness. Okay, and we'll talk about ways to forge common humanity through intentional practice and a certain way of engaging in community that validates your Blackness and undercuts anti-Blackness within you. Okay, again, keep this focus on self. This is self-development, okay? So mindfulness, step one, it's like glue, okay? It keeps any philosophy intact because you interact with it as a guiding principle. Mindfulness isn't paying attention sometimes when we're practicing self-compassion. It's all the time. Why? Your inner narrative is always going. So if your inner narrative is always going, and you might have a tendency to criticize yourself or not love yourself, that could happen at any moment, whether you're saying things to yourself or if you're doing things that reflect low self-esteem or self-criticism, even if you're not commenting on it. You need mindfulness as an overlay to be able to catch that stuff. The mindfulness is like the net that catches everything that you see. It's a spotlight awareness that you can improve, okay? And Black people, we need to be extra intentional with mindfulness, pay a lot of attention to know what to internalize and what to not, okay? And again, this is just respecting the power of the anti-Black, colorblind gaslight. We need to be on our ones and twos with this, okay? And then with mindfulness, you pay attention all the time and you practice the method to become the method. So it's not that I want to practice more self-compassion in my life. I want to become a more self-compassionate person, right? Now that colors all of your behaviors, not just sometimes, it's all of them, right? And I'm giving you a more wide-reaching, more powerful, potent, robust form of this philosophy, because in my opinion, in my professional opinion and personal and spiritual, with all of the anti-Blackness here, we need to be aggressive in this practice. If we want to pass on our generational trauma, we have to learn self-compassion for ourselves. And we need to teach that to our community through a personal embodiment, okay? So also, internalizing self-compassion is internalizing the anti-Black antidote. Again, no enemies within, you become impossible to gaslight, right? Then racism, at first it becomes like, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. That's not me or whatever. To the point it becomes pretty ridiculous. And again, watching videos of both Malcolm X and Toni Morrison, you can see their embodiment of this when they're talking to white people. You can see how the projections, the gaslighting, the racism just kind of falls off of them. It's that firmness, right? It's the antidote within our consciousness, okay? So mindfulness, in essence, it's the skill of awareness all the time. And that's how it ties into anti-Blackness. So now, how do we mindfulness? What do we do? What happens? Okay. So now I'm bleeding more so into my identity as a meditation teacher. I only teach two things in terms of meditation and mindfulness and paying attention. You have one, right meditation. Two, right understanding. What do these things mean? One, right meditation means the effort of maintaining your present moment awareness, not future, not past, right here in your body, here, okay? Maintaining present moment awareness of your insides. So meaning your emotions, your thoughts, all of that, you're just aware in the moment, okay? So now, there are two parts to right meditation, okay? There is the formal practicing of this, okay? So formal practicing awareness can mean formal sitting meditation, okay? You're sitting, you're closing your eyes, you're watching everything that's happening inside of you, right? Without judging it. You can be in nature and really be paying attention and practicing presence in nature. You can practice presence listening to music, playing video games, knitting, doing your nails, journaling. You're increasing your awareness of how you are and feeling and thinking in the moment. The more you pay attention to what you're feeling and thinking and embodying in the moment, the more you're able to practice what I call informal mindfulness, which is present moment focus in everyday life, okay? And in Buddhist traditions, as well as in Hindu practices as well. The goal of meditation is enlightenment to the point where you're meditating all the time. This is on a spectrum. So meditation, right meditation, doesn't mean just paying attention to your insides while you're doing your formal practices. That's a part of it. The second part of that is bringing your practice of awareness and present moment focus all the time, no matter what you're doing. If you can see the present moment, you can see what to do next. It becomes this problem solving superpower when you practice formal practices. So my suggestion, pick formal practice or formal practices to do each day, time limited, and then practice informal mindfulness, practicing present moment focus all the time, no matter what you're doing. The more present you are, the more you're just going to see reality, the more things are going to make sense. And the more you practice the formal, the stronger your informal gets, because you're just increasing your capacity to pay attention. Okay. And again, so knowing what to do and when depends on your ability to see. Meditation improves that. So stronger attention practices, stronger formal practices of mindfulness, meditation, or awareness, or journaling, or whatever it is, stronger embodiment of self-compassion. Okay. So, let's grab my coffee here. The second part of this, okay, so none of this matters unless we have right understanding. Right understanding is the embodied understanding of a life philosophy that you personally choose. Okay, it's not intellectual. It's not just I'm, saying affirmations in the morning without actually embodying and living those affirmations, right? You need to become the self-loving person. Okay, so when you are living your daily life, right? Say you practice in terms of to increase your awareness. Say you practice 10 minutes meditation each morning, and then you practice throughout the day. The embodied right understanding example of self-compassion is you see when you're not being kind to yourself, and then you see how you feel when you do that. Okay. Self-compassion is what we're talking about in this case, but it can be any value or habit that you want to integrate. Mindfulness can be the vehicle. You, again, right meditation to allow that awareness to become omnipresent throughout everything, right? Always there. Right understanding to say, okay, am I being compassionate to myself in this moment? I can recognize it, and my understanding of self-compassion is then applied to the present moment. And then if I act in that moment and change my self-talk in that moment, now I'm practicing the embodiment. Okay. So mindfulness is also energy work. Okay. So practices in awareness of your insides allow for this compass, this emotional compass for energy work. When people talk about intuition, emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, when we attune to our emotional, what's going on in our insides and what is causing what, then we know, okay, this food gives me a headache. We know, okay, this person makes me feel drained. This person makes me feel nervous. Da, da, da. When you start to get the Rolodex of what you need and what you don't need in your life throughout your whole life, you can build a life that supports your nourishment, your self-compassion, your life. This becomes complicated, of course, when we're talking anti-Blackness, but you see what I mean. So this can also guide choices in relationships, hobbies, relaxation. And then also when we're paying attention to energy and using our emotional compass, so to speak, lets us know when to energetically close or compartmentalize, okay, in situations with heightened emotional stress that we can't get out of, okay? So normally, when a person feels bad in a situation, they can just leave that situation or say something to change it, right? When it comes to anti-Blackness, that's not always possible, okay? So we might, in these moments, feel the aggression of another at work, and choose how we want to be. If the aggression seems racist and I can't leave, right, I know that color blindness fuels racism. Racists won't validate my reality that's rooted in critical consciousness. Okay. So, how do I manage my energy in this situation without looking for validation that racism happened? First, I validate myself that racism happened. Then I might not be as vulnerable and emotionally open in having that, what did I say, intimate contact with people with low racial literacy or people who might microaggress against you or be outright racist towards you. We need to know to not seek validation in those individuals or those systems through how they're making us feel. So if we're feeling bad in a moment because our intelligence is being questioned or something like that, we trust that. And then we all have our own styles. For me, I start to get real quiet all of a sudden. If I'm sharing my thoughts or sharing my ideas and someone starts to be microaggressive, or especially if it's someone with power or some over me in a job situation or something like that, I might become quiet. Why? I figured out for myself, I have a harder time speaking if I'm in speaking truth when I'm dysregulated, right? So I might become quiet, or I might start practicing deep breathing, right? But then also energy work is knowing, all right, if I have to go back into that environment, I'm going to plan self-care later in the afternoon, right? I'm embodying self-compassion, whatever that may mean. But mindfulness and energy in this way, you're practicing the ability to feel into what makes you feel good and try to, promote those things, minimize pain if you can, and also manage energetic, authentic opening or closing. And this is where your code switch needs to become more like a mask that isn't real, right? This is tricky, but sometimes it's better to just code switch and be what white supremacy needs you to be, to then just get the hell out of the situation. The trick is not identifying with your mask, not becoming the mask or forgetting who you are. So now let's talk about kindness. Okay, so that's mindfulness. Glue its attention, its awareness. Okay, and you can practice that doing some of the things that I suggested. So this is one of the trickier ones, kindness, inner kindness. You need to grow this like a plant with roots into your heart, okay? If you are connected to your awareness and your emotions, right? And you can tell what nourishes you and what depletes you, okay? Your love for yourself and your kindness for yourself actually grows depending on the environment, just like a flower, right? You can't like leave a flower on the windowsill when it's scorching hot out and it starts to dry up. You don't look at the flower and say, why aren't you growing? You say, oh crap, your environment is very good. Your environment isn't helping this grow. So if you want self-compassion, developing a nice inner environment is really one of the only things that you really need. Right? The other stuff is just to grease the wheels. You need to create an environment to allow that those feelings of love and self-support flourish. Okay. So your inner voice, here's what aspirationally, what we're going for. Your inner voice is kind, grounded, realistic, like an ideal parent. Okay. Only you build this voice if you practice good energetic boundaries. Only you create it. Okay. So you're not, if you can identify color blindness, right, and you can see that oh, that's not kind. This calls for unity and all this stuff. They just don't want to talk about race. When you can see those things and identify those things, you won't internalize them. Okay. You need to build that voice and you need to become the kindness inside of you. Don't invite external voices unless they embody that same kind voice that you aspire to embody. Similarly, don't internalize voices with lower racial literacy. Same thing. So the kind voice is positive, okay, workable, sees situations as workable, right? It's unquestioning. Bad things happen. Oh, well, it's workable. We'll get around. Da da da. It's supportive in that way, but it's also validating of pain. Okay, and it thinks in forward momentum, thinking forward, being future focused. Once we see problems, all right, how do we make this work? Right? There's a hopefulness. There's an inspiration that sees struggle as something to overcome rather than something to be overwhelmed by or something that you can't beat. Okay. And really we're going for this sort of buoyant, kind of chipper like a dolphin kind of attitude, like that's the inner space you want to develop. And you can practice talking to yourself in these uplifting sorts of ways. All right. I know I told you to be like a tiger before, but now I need you to be like a tiger and a dolphin. So we want to build this inner world. And when we do that, then the negative messages from the outside become less believable and then eventually kind of laughable. Okay, then when that weird racist thing that person said, or what happened to me on Twitter last night, someone tried to bait me and I could see, and then I said, wait, what? This is ridiculous. You're just trying to get a rise out of me, white guy, you know? So once you start to have this kind of inner world, when messages come at you that aren't very kind, it will seem like another language to you. It won't make any sense because it's in contrast with how you talk to and view yourself. You see what I'm saying? So by building and turning up the volume of your kindness inside, it drowns out the outside noise. Okay. Not always. Not always. There will be pain, but you won't be internalizing it. So now the opposite of kindness is self-criticism. So criticizing yourself for doing something or being a particular way. Here, this is where we talk about radical blamelessness. Okay, so radical blamelessness is essentially the idea that Broderick's personality is acting itself out. Broderick is happening. He's not, I'm not doing anything. Why? I was born, didn't choose who I was born to, right? My parents and society project expectations and opinions onto me. I start to seek validation for my ability to act out those projections. So my parents will love me and society will approve of me. And now my personality is seeking those things unconsciously. So then I continue to seek out similar experiences throughout my lifespan. So my personality is just happening and trying its best with what it was taught. You know, I'm talking about myself like I'm someone else. See, you have to have compassion for the personality that was developed, right? And my very ability to talk about Broderick as someone else inherently implies that I'm not exactly the personality, right? And this is kind of where we go into the spiritual realm. We won't go too far with that, but really you want to see yourself as an imperfect being who's trying their best. You only live life once. So when you blame yourself for situations or for things that you did, you're blaming yourself as if you were there before or like you knew before. You didn't, right? You didn't. And you're just happening and you're trying your best. We're not trying to shirk accountability or responsibility for things that happen, right? We just don't want you to blame yourself, right, for doing that. That also reflects individualism, right? Individualistic culture. And as Africans, we are collectivistic. This doesn't even fit within our cultural memory, self-blame. It doesn't make sense, okay? So emotional abuse can also be an inside job. If you're talking to yourself and criticizing yourself, think about whether or not you would talk to a child like that if they made a mistake, right? Then you can see, oh crap, I'm like emotionally abusing myself. Yeah, that's possible. And this is what self-criticism is in its more intense forms. It's also an attempt to feel in control, kind of like perfectionism too. If I believe I can be perfect, and that's the belief of omnipotent control, all pervading control over everything. You don't have control, right? And kindness is an antidote to that harsh truth. We're all gonna die eventually, right? Racism exists, right? People we know will disappoint us, will pass away, will all of that human vulnerability, when we acknowledge it and we acknowledge that we're not in control of the pain we experience in this world, we're not in control and we're going to make mistakes. When we acknowledge that and accept it, compassion is the only antidote to it. It's the only logical solution to our predicament as humans. Okay. And that's what any spiritual truth will guide you right into. That's it. It's just an analysis of, okay, what makes the most sense based on our true predicament, right? And here you can see that self-criticism is just an attempt at control. You want to feel like by criticizing yourself, you're going to make yourself not make mistakes. You know, by being perfect, then I'll always know and I'll never not know. That's ridiculous, right? And you know that's ridiculous, but we're striving for perfection anyway, right? To first be able to practice self-compassion, I need to tell you why self-criticism doesn't make much sense, right? So here we're going to outline a way to overcome self-criticism, and we'll take a very brief break here. But this is a journaling practice to end self-criticism. So at the end of each day, you want to use these prompts, okay, and use it in this way. This is also using mindfulness. Once you get the self-criticism off of you, self-compassion is a lot easier to practice. So at the end of each day, you want to respond to these. 1, was I critical to myself today? Okay. 2, what was an example of how I spoke to myself or treated myself critically, right? So not just how you're speaking to yourself, how you're also acting towards yourself. So it might be, oh, I didn't eat lunch, I skipped lunch, or I called myself an idiot for da-da-da-da, right? Then number 3, how did treating myself like that make me feel in the moment? How does it make me feel when I reflect on it now? Likely, you're going to feel like bad, down, maybe sad, maybe shame, different things, right? And you're acknowledging right there that you might have caused that, right? You might notice more anxiety, sadness, whatever it is. Then number 4, what is a more compassionate thing I could have said to myself in the moment? Okay. Or what I could have done differently to reflect more self-compassion in that moment. Okay. Then last one, how will I be more compassionate to myself tomorrow? Okay. So that sort of pledges and hammers home the intention. Okay. Lastly, at the beginning of each day, reread your last entry out loud several times. We need to embody this. So this is mindfulness, right? Do not be your own enemy. Do not be your own enemy. It allows you to be more easily gaslit by colorblindness and people that aren't supportive or loving towards you. You need to put the seed of compassion inside of yourself, and you need to nourish it. This is only your job. Other people can help, but ultimately it comes down to you and how you talk to yourself. Okay. And we'll take a brief break here, and then we'll wrap up with common humanity. Okay, so now we're going to wrap up and talking about common humanity. So common humanity for Black people, it means unity in terms of self-compassion. As you can see, self-compassion and liberation strategy is pretty intertwined. But here, this is the missing Black liberation link to me. It's kind of beaten to my head as a kid too, with my dad's. A lot of my dad's response, he would always go, "Son, we just don't stick together as a people." And when you embody common humanity, you internalize the antidote to the isolated experience of racism. So you join emotionally, you join the Wakanda of the collective Black subconscious. Okay. Let me say it again. Join the Wakanda of the collective Black subconscious. Okay. This is a space where we are real. Okay. The collective experience of Chadwick's death reflects this truth. We were all grieving together. That's our level of emotional connection. When we focus on that and fixate on that connection, you'll never feel alone in terms of racism. And that's another part of what Black and mental health is. You know, it's just an effort to validate and unify our consciousness. Okay. And then Black Twitter reflects this too, right? There's certain in the versus battles and different things in Black culture, we need to do a better job at unifying around these things to feel more connected and more real in our experiences. Okay. Our culture was stolen, but it's still here because we are it. We are here. When there's erasure, there's also space to create. And here we have an ability to co-create new African culture with ourselves, right? And this is what I think Afrofuturism really, really captures, right? What can we create together? What can we enjoy in together and still have this unified experience of reality? So there's collective grief, rage, and joy, right? When we think about Lil Nas, right? And the collective celebration and love for this LGBTQ, Black man, you can just feel the love and appreciation from the Black culture here at this moment for this man, right? We also think about Naomi Osaka, right? We think about her and her battling mental health while she's trying to perform as an overburdened Black woman in this society. You can feel us wrapping ourselves emotionally around these individuals, and this happens in Black culture all the time. We need to remember and fixate and participate in those moments of unity to better unify that common humanity, which we already have. It's already there, okay? And confidence as a Black person comes when you see that you're not alone. See yourself not as the drop of water, but the entire ocean. But you need to enter that collective consciousness to be able to feel the full weight of that ocean, of folks who are still here and alive today, as well as the wave of the ancestors behind you, okay? So just in terms of realistic practices now, how do we make this come alive, right? So we need authentic, decolonized Black mirroring. What this means is I'm talking to you like a Black dude, and you talking to me like a Black person too, right? We're not code switching, right? Non-code switch conversation, right? We can't always do that, but we only want to code switch as much as we need to make sure that white supremacy doesn't ruin our lives, right? Other than that, other than those times, energetically, we need to let ourselves loose more, okay? We need to be in community with Black and brown folks. We need to appreciate Black art, whether it's film, if it's music, we need to appreciate and partake in what makes us us, authentically, naturally, with no whiteness in it. We need to root for Black people. We need to hype each other up, for goodness sake. Like the world does enough anti-Blackness, right, for any of us to feel not confident. We need to stop doing that with ourselves. Even if you don't agree with something a Black person is doing per se, being mindful, right, of us lifting each other up. And I think they're this is probably for another talk, but in terms of Blackness, maleness, and patriarchy, that throws a monkey wrench of a bunch of issues into that, mutual support. But I think you get at the gist of what I'm saying, right? Not the nuance exactly, but the overarching principle. So we need to share in not just the pain to validate or the grief, but the joy, the laughter, the happiness with each other. This helps us double down on our non-gaslit reality. If we are prioritizing community and non-code switch conversation, like now reality is real, it's reflected back to me. We need to build that validation, not let white supremacist society gaslight us out of, seeing these things, okay? And feeling that collective truth with each other. We can't let that happen. That's our responsibility as a culture. That's us. We need to do that. No one's going to do it for us. So we connect our truth to the collective truth. Now, drop of water into the ocean. Okay. Now you see what we're rocking with. And to say all of this to say we need to live life from the soul. Okay. So manifestation in particular, it happens when we can focus our energy, be intentional and mindful behind it, and then integrate that behavior. That's what manifestation is. It's not just a vision board, nothing. You can manifest energy, right? If you have that love and you're letting your emotions flow in such a way that allows that process to happen, okay? And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then on the next slide, then it makes us more creative when we're self-compassionate. We're energetically more open, right? We're better with boundary setting, right? We can identify people who are going to bring down our energy versus lift it up. We also become less rigid and more composed. When you're less rigid, there's more possibilities. When there's more possibilities, problems seem like problems, but there isn't just one way to solve them, which makes you more composed because you can see, okay, well, there's this possibility, this one, this one, this one, right? So being calm in the face of conflict is trusting oneself, yeah, but it's also knowing that there, any possible solution is possible. You just didn't think of it yet, right? What's that trust? And we're comfortable with discomfort, right? Because we are so self-compassionate to ourselves when we feel anxiety, we feel anxious or angrier or pain or anything. We're so damn validating towards ourselves that we don't care what emotional experience we're happening. We're comfortable with it. And this makes us very, very powerful and seemingly fearless, and tireless in our work and in our lives, and uncompromising in our beliefs in self-love and Black liberation. And lastly here, and then we'll wrap up, this is a little bit more about the spectrum of happiness, and here where a lot of this stuff is coming from on the spiritual side of things. So this is more so my identity as a reverend here. This is about self-actualization at its core. So it allows us to die into ourselves, become so accepting to ourselves that we're no longer preventing ourselves from being us. Okay. The full potential of our consciousness is self-actualization, enlightenment, which is a constant flow state, a feeling of deep meditation all the time. Pain still exists, but your resistance to it does not. Okay. And now when we think about self-compassion, all pain can be experienced. Okay. You don't block them. That blockage and resistance to pain, right? That's what prevents that flow of energy. So we want to ventilate our energetic channels with self-compassion and mindfulness of energy and sharing in community. Become that full potential. Allow yourself to flourish. And it's an as it is sort of reality, understanding of reality. It's like a math equation. Okay. When you operate in reality as it is, you can see all the numbers on the page. You're not blocking anything that makes you uncomfortable. Then you can solve problems knowing the full weight of reality when you can see what is. If you love yourself enough, you can look at anything and feel anything depending on what you're looking at and continue to look anyway. Continue to see. Our tendency to look away from pain is directly related to our ability to self-soothe and so love ourselves without identifying with pain, right? So once we look at life and we can see all the numbers on the page, we become more creative, more flexible in our problem solving, and we don't just not solve math problems or pretend that they're simple when they're not, okay? So we find our purpose through our being. The more we become us, the more we flock to and are drawn to and magnetized towards our purposes. But we have to develop that trust, even when we don't know what our purpose is. Okay. And you can always improve the conditions of your energetic garden. You can always improve more. Okay. And remember, these two types of mindfulness that help us practice self-actualization and enlightenment as Black people, finding peace, inner peace here now. Two types: right meditation in your awareness practices, and then right understanding, which is your guiding principle that you choose. You can use self-compassion here, but it's also a form. This is a style of Buddhist practice and study, which is called Tantra. So you just act as if you're enlightened all the time as a guiding principle until it happens. Okay, this is kind of similar to what would Jesus do. Very similar kind of thing, but it's embodied. And then also paying attention to energy in your relationships. Self, your relationship with yourself, with others, with the physical world, food, different things, your emotional world, your mental world. You are relating to it. You can control your energetic relationship with things. Keep in mind, sometimes it's not about two people changing to change a dynamic. Sometimes you can relate to yourself and to the dynamic differently, and then the dynamic will change. Okay, this is big. Focus on self. Focus on self. That's where you have the most control over your reality, by investing in yourself. Okay, and just a quick word on the Buddha's arrow here. I wanted to name that particular metaphor here. So the Buddha, there was a story to illustrate the difference between pain and suffering. So if an arrow is shot up and into somebody's leg, right, in battle, right, this is a story Buddha told, we have a few choices here. We can say, who did that? Who did that? Look for who shot the arrow. We can look at the arrow and say, oh man, this is so terrible. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You see, inherently, you're fighting with the reality. Instead, just take the arrow out and start to dress the wound, right? You're addressing pain, addressing suffering. The resistance is not resisting. We don't know how to not resist if we don't have that sense of deep love and self-respect for ourselves and kindness for ourselves on the inside. Okay. So as a conclusion, I threw a lot at you. Thanks for hanging out with me today. We have mindfulness, kindness, calming humanity as a part of self-compassion, leading to more creativity, more intention, keeping anti-Blackness in mind and color blindness in mind as we're working through our reality. We can keep our critical consciousness intact with the addition of mindfulness. And then practice. We're talking about practice, Allen Iverson. This is what we're talking about. You have to practice these things. The benefits of the things taught in this presentation depend completely on you practicing these specific things for an extended period of time. This isn't 1 week, this isn't 2 weeks. You know, try it for 3 weeks to a month and then see how you feel, right? Then you decide, okay, is it working or is it not working? Okay. And happy Black and Mental Health Week. For me and myself, you can find me on Twitter at Dr. Brod Sawyer. You can also check out my website for more information on me. That's my email address right there, Broderick at brodericksawyer.com. I do a bunch of different things, workshops, keynotes, consultation, meditation, teaching, etc. I also love reading appreciation emails too. So if you have the time, want to know how this landed on you, shoot me an email. I definitely appreciate reading those as well. But thank you so much, just for allowing me to enter your brain waves for a little bit. I really hope this was helpful. I hope it helps you in your personal life, or it gets you thinking about things that you can create in different ways that you can contribute as well. But thank you so much. And again, happy Black and Mental Health Week.